All right, hi everyone. Welcome to 2025. This is the January 2025 Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. My name is Emily Adrid, and I am with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And today we have presentations from the Colorado Climate Center and NRCS. So I will hand it over to Russ in case but before that, does anybody have any announcements they want to share with the group? All right. So Russ, I guess I'll hand it over to you. Um, and for everybody in the audience, if you could just put your name and affiliation in the chat, that would be great.
All righty. Get this to go away. Okay, you see it okay?
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, I will get started then. There we go. Yeah, morning everybody. I guess before I get started here, I'll introduce somebody on our end who is Ali Masaryk is on the call, who just joined our staff of the Climate Center. I guess yesterday was her first day, but she's here on the call probably at some point. We'll get her in the rotation of doing these presentations down the line. So say hi to Ali there in the chat or whatever. But yeah, we'll jump off on the update for looking back at December and where we're at so far for the water year and for January so far. Okay, so if we look back, so we'll start off by looking back at the stats through the end of December. So this is for the water year through the end of December, first 3 months of the water year. Temperature rankings across the state. And you can see through those first 3 months, it is very warm almost everywhere in the state, with some spots being record warm for the first 3 months of the water year. Statewide, the fifth warmest start to the water year. October was really warm. November was closer to average. December was really warm. Come back to that in a bit. And then here's the same, but for precipitation. So you can see really, I guess the one thing to point out here is still the effects of that massive storm in early to mid-November in southeastern Colorado. We talked about that at the last meeting, I guess the November meeting. But this is that was a near record storm for a lot of areas, and so you can, especially for this time of year, so you can see it still kind of dominating the statistics there, where a lot of southeastern Colorado will have one of their wettest winters on, or November through the winter periods on record, just from that one storm. The rest of the state closer to average in terms of the first 3 months of the water year. October was near average, November really wet, December pretty dry, and we'll come back to that. So here's the quadrant chart for December. So this is just for the month of December. So again, if you're not familiar with these, all the dots here, of course, are all the different years of 2024 highlighted for that month. And then the horizontal axis is precipitation. So wet is to the right. The vertical axis is temperature, so warm is to the top. So the upper left is the warm and dry quadrant. Upper right is warm and wet. Lower left, cool and dry. Lower right, cool and wet. So you see 2024 stands out really. Only 1980 surpassed, December 1980 surpassed December 2024 in terms of being warm and dry across the state. So it was quite a notable month in terms of the warmth and the lack of precipitation. Here's the same thing now, though, for the first 3 months of the water year, and you can see there warm, as we mentioned, but a little bit wetter than average over that period, averaged over the state. So that gives a sense of where things stood as of the end of December. And December, of course, closed out it was a very warm month, and it closed out the end of the calendar year, which was a very warm calendar year, the fourth warmest on record for Colorado. And you can see here's the long-term temperature anomalies. So these are with respect to the late 20th century average. So the blue years were years that were cooler than the late 20th century average. The red years warmer. Obviously, there are a lot more warmer than cooler years in recent decades, and this last year was another one of those. And 8 of the 10 warmest years statewide have been since 2012. So just in the last decade or so. So that warming trend continues. It was the warmest year on record globally as well. So Colorado was warm, just like much of the rest of the planet. Here is December. Now we'll focus in just on December. So here's the temperature ranks for December. It was the warmest December on record for much of northeastern Colorado, and the third warmest statewide, behind only 1980 and 2021 Decembers. And part of what was going on, especially on the Eastern Plains, was not so much that it was really warm all the time, but just that it never got cold in December. So a lot of stations had their, not quite sure how to write it, their warmest, coldest temperature for December, or actually for the whole season, the whole cool season up to that point. So like at Fort Collins, the coldest that we got from September through December was 15 Fahrenheit. The previous high there was 12. Obviously, it's been cold, much colder now in January, which we'll get to in a minute. But a lot of those types of records broken for just not having any cold air in December, especially across the Eastern Plains. So that's why it ranked, top 10 warm and record warm in some places. Here was precipitation for December. So in a lot of those same places that had a record warm December also had very dry conditions in December. So that's, much of the northeastern plains, and a lot of the lower elevations in western Colorado. The mountains were closer to average thanks to a couple of active storm cycles right at the end of December, really, and then extending into early January. So that's what December looked like for precipitation. Okay, so now we'll move into January, because things clearly changed quite a lot from those warm and dry conditions that we had through December. January has brought winter back. So this is the month-to-date precipitation for January through Monday morning, so through the morning of the 20th. Hasn't been much since then. So you can see the mountains with the most precipitation, especially the northern mountains, as expected. Not so much in the southern mountains, and I'm sure Brian will dive further into that in terms of the snowpack. Down in those areas, the Front Range and Eastern Plains, after that dry December, have been getting repeated snow here so far in January. And so, yeah, you can kind of see where that stands on the map. And then here's where that is as a percent of average through the 20th. So again, Front Range, Eastern Plains are well above average for January now that we've had these repeated snowstorms. But you can start to see southwestern Colorado especially really jumping out here with very little precipitation for January. A lot of areas, again, especially at the lower elevations, having no or very little precipitation this month so far. And so that's the part of the state where we're starting to see drought expand and get worse, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. And then temperature. December was really warm. January has been quite cold in most places, except for far western Colorado and some parts of southern Colorado have been near to above average. Most of the rest of the state has been 6 to 10 degrees cooler than average up through this point, which is especially from this cold blast that we've had the last few days. And so we'll take a quick look at that, just some numbers and statistics on the cold air in January. This, for example, was yesterday's low low temperatures at the Coagmet stations around the state. Some real cold in, say, in Grand County. See that the Granby Coagmet stations -37. I think there were some reports of below -40 in other parts of Grand County. So that was one of the coldest spots. Gunnison, extremely cold. But I think with respect to, those are places though that typically get really cold when it gets cold in the winter, right? Some of the ones that stand out, I think, even more are actually in the Arkansas Valley. These getting 20 below is pretty rare in the Arkansas Valley. So those are standout kind of numbers there. And from 3 days in a row from this cold blast. You might remember that almost at the same time last year, we also had a significant Arctic blast through the state. So just as a little bit of a comparison, this was the coldest day of that one, January 16th in 2024, and then the coldest day from this one, it would have been yesterday morning. Monday night, Tuesday morning. So you can just kind of do a little bit of comparison. Northeastern Colorado didn't get nearly as cold this year as it did last year. Last year in that cold wave was, a lot of -20s and -30s. Not so many of those there, but the Arkansas Valley generally got colder, at least parts of it. Not, some spots were colder last year. And then similar temperatures in those cold mountain park areas, North Park, Middle Park, in the -20s and -30s. So it was the when you analyze the data, there is not all that much evidence for the legend of stock show weather, but there's definitely been stock show weather the last 2 years with a significant cold blast in that part of the winter in mid-January. So yeah, I think that's what I've got on that. Okay, so now we'll move on to looking at some of the drought indicators, and then also then go ahead to the outlook. So here's just a satellite picture of Colorado from Monday. Lots of snow cover across the eastern plains with those recent storms. But you can see some not snow covered. The San Luis Valley is not snow covered at this point, and similarly the valley areas, the lower elevations in southwestern Colorado, lacking snow. Not too unusual for that to be the case at this time of the year, but still, it's kind of a pretty picture of where the snow is and is not at the moment. Here's the last week's U.S. Drought Monitor. So this is from a week ago. The new map will come out tomorrow. But you can see the drought across the southwestern U.S. especially, and then up through the northern Great Plains. Those are the places with some of the worst drought conditions. Obviously, everybody's been aware of the wildfire situation in Southern California, where the short-term drought has gotten quite bad there, with very little precipitation recently. Here's the map for Colorado from last week. So you can see the worst drought conditions in the state still being in northern Colorado, where there are deficits going back really to last spring, significant precipitation deficits. When tomorrow's map comes out, there will likely be some improvements in northern Colorado. And then you can see the drought areas expanding generally in southwestern Colorado and northwestern Colorado in recent weeks, as there's been very little precipitation in those areas. And here's the change map. So this is since the beginning of the water year, where the changes have taken place on the drought monitor. So again, southwestern Colorado drought intensifying. Similarly, parts of northern Colorado where the drought's been intensifying since the start of the water year. But once the data from this past week's this recent snowstorms come in, we'll see some improvements along the northern Front Range, and then big improvements since the start of the water year, mostly from that big November storm in southeastern Colorado. Okay, soil moisture. These are our soil moisture percentile maps around the state. So this is the shallower layer on the left, the deeper layer on the right, color shaded, sort of like the drought monitor categories, but then with also the wet on there. So soil moisture is still showing up as really good, really plentiful across southeast Colorado and the San Luis Valley. Again, really from that storm in November came at a real good time, and there was so much precipitation that soil moisture hopefully will persist into the spring. And then the deficits are showing up in the places where and this is about a week old. The data is like usually 6 days, 5 6 days behind with these. So the snow of the last few days hasn't been factored in here yet, but you can still see those deficits in parts of northern Colorado where the summer and fall were really dry and there hadn't been much precipitation up until very recently. So the soil moisture still shows up as low there. And then this is I think I showed this for the first time last meeting. We're still kind of evaluating this, taking closer looks at it. So this is terrestrial water storage from the same data set, which is the combination of groundwater plus soil moisture plus snowpack. So here, this picture looks a little bit different, but some of the same drought areas in northern Colorado really show up there, mostly from soil moisture deficits and probably from, to some extent, groundwater depletion. But then you start to see places like in southwest Colorado, northwest Colorado, where this indicator lines up pretty well with the recent precipitation deficits and what's going on there. So this is a NASA project. We're working with NASA on trying to make sense of some of these projects. So these products. So feedback welcome as always on these or anything that we're looking at. Okay, so we can take a look ahead at what we might be seeing going forward in the outlook. Here is the near-term outlook, the 7-day precipitation forecast from NOAA across the region. So you can see some precipitation showing up here on the map across much of the state in the mountains, as well as say the Northern Front Range and some of the valleys. Most of this there's going to be another snowstorm coming in Friday, Saturday, mostly, and that's where most of this precipitation will show up, and I'll show that in a second. And here's what that looks like as a departure from average, the difference from the average. So again, this is really peak snowpack building season in the mountains. So getting an inch of precipitation actually is not keeping up with the average at the highest elevations, like in the Park Range or in the San Juans. Certainly better than nothing, but that actually doesn't even keep up with average to get an inch of liquid at some of those high elevation areas. On the other hand, if the lower elevation precipitation, if it pans out in southwest Colorado, would be very welcome, and also in the continued dry areas along the Northern Front Range. And here's the same maps, just with lots of the individual days broken out. So same maps we just looked at the top here, but then now the individual days. So a little bit of snow in the mountains today, and then that other storm coming in Saturday for the northern mountains, and then persisting Sunday to Monday in the southern mountains and the lower elevations there. So we'll hope that pans out for the areas that have been getting not very much precipitation, especially in southwestern Colorado. So we'll see what happens with it and how much moisture comes out of that storm. In terms of temperature, this is for Denver, just from the ensemble forecast, looking out the next 2 weeks. All the different colors are the different model forecasts, and the black is the mean. The climatology is the gray lines here. So it's been cold lately. The average temperature at this time later in January is in the mid to upper 40s along the Front Range. We haven't been seeing much of that in the last week or so, and expected to stay colder than average. Friday will be a warmer day, but still probably cooler than average. Through the weekend, through that next snowstorm, and then warming up for the last week of January into early February, it looks like. And then, as usual, the weather forecasts get pretty unpredictable out past 10 or 12 days or so. And then here's what that looks like on the NOAA outlooks for the 8 to 14 day period. So this is basically the last week of January into the first week of February. Leaning a bit towards above average temperatures on the eastern plains, but otherwise not a big temperature signal, which is consistent with what we just looked at. But not a very active period in terms of precipitation. So especially western Colorado and into the southwest US, tilting towards a relatively dry week there over the last week of January into the beginning of February. This is another way of looking at that similar information that I was experimenting with recently. This is from one of those ensembles of weather forecasts. So like like that plume chart we looked at a minute ago, but this is for precipitation. And this is showing basically the probability from that weather prediction ensemble over the next 15 days being below average, near average, or above average for precipitation. So you can see western Colorado continues over the next 15 days generally to be pretty high probability of below average precipitation. So we'll have the storm this weekend, but then it looks like it will be not very active beyond that for the next week or so. After that storm in western Colorado. On the other hand, the Front Range, Eastern Plains look like they'll be in the near average to above average area, range over that period, with looking like, there will be these periodic, maybe not big snowstorms, but periodic snowstorms over the next couple of weeks along the Front Range and Eastern Plains. So any thoughts on these graphics are welcome as well. It's been kind of a, at least in my own brain, a nice way to summarize all of this that doesn't get separated out by the 0 to 7 and 8 to 14 day period, combines them all together. All right, let's look out a little bit farther then for the seasonal information related to El Nino, La Nina. So we do have La Nina in place now. It did finally get established over the last month or two, but it's not a particularly strong La Nina, and it's expected to go back towards neutral conditions by the spring. So if you like the graphical probabilities here on the top, this is showing, by spring, March, April, May, June, the highest probability is of neutral conditions with some chance that we're still in La Nina by then. So this is the summary from that ENSO discussion, that La Nina is expected to persist through the February through April period, but then transition to ENSO neutral during March, April, May as we get into spring. And so I think that's generally good news. La Ninas tend not to be good for precipitation, especially in eastern Colorado in the spring. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out, and we can see how it looks in the seasonal outlooks, which very much reflect the La Nina, persisting at least into the spring. So this is for the February, March, April period for temperature, and I've put the little dot there at Durango so you can look at what the pie charts look like in that area. So again, think about these as a measure of confidence in being above or below average for temperature. So not much signal across northern Colorado, but a tilt toward warmer than average conditions across the southern tier for that February, March, April period, which again is quite consistent with the with the La Nina that's in place. And then here's the same for precipitation. So the southwestern US tilting towards drier than average conditions for the February, March, April period. And then that signal gets even more confident as we go. This is now shifted a month later. This is March, April, May. And you see this bullseye kind of right over the Colorado River Basin, which is not really what you want to see in the spring. So if we look at, say, Durango, more than 50% chance of a below average, of a drier than average spring season, and a small chance of being above average. So that's a fairly confident forecast in a dry spring. Again, lined up with the La Nina, and you can see really all of Colorado is tilted towards drier than average conditions. Although again, the southwestern part of the state is where that the confidence is the highest in that. So these are the areas that have been where drought has been expanding and intensifying recently. So this is not a great signal for that springtime period. So I guess to summarize some takeaways, December of 2024 was very warm across the state and concluded a very warm calendar year, the fourth warmest on record. Things changed in a pretty big way in January. So the first 3 months of the water year were warm and then wet in southeastern Colorado from that big November storm. Then a big shift into January where it's been cold with above average snowfall in eastern Colorado, but not very much precipitation in the southwest. We have La Nina in place, but it's expected to wane by the springtime. And I think the seasonal outlook for the spring is concerning across the southwestern US. The odds are, tilted pretty strongly toward warmer and drier than average conditions across the Southwest, and that includes southwestern Colorado. But as always, the seasonal outlooks are, they have skill. They're better than just making random guesses for sure, but they also are wrong fairly frequently. So take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but I think it is something to be keeping an eye on, and we'll certainly be doing that, and preparing or being at least ready for the possibility of worsening drought conditions in that part of the state. So there is the contact info as usual, our website, my email, how to subscribe to our things that we send out, and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks,
And
Rex.
I don't know if there's anything in the chat. I'll leave this up for
Um,
now, or somebody can just ask.
yeah, I have a quick question. On the soil moisture maps, I'm curious if those are what the resolution for those maps are, and if it's like satellite imagery, like how do you get that data?
Yeah, great question. So there are some direct soil moisture measurements in Colorado, but not that many. Certainly not at the resolution that you see here, but there is a big new initiative underway that I think at least some of you here on the call are connected to or involved with, to deploy a lot more soil moisture sensors, but those aren't the key source of data yet. Hopefully they will be in the future. So yes, then the additional information is, satellite information, precipitation, the observed precipitation from radars and satellites and rain gauges. And then all of that is run through a model. So this particular model is NASA's land data assimilation system. And so the resolution of the actual grid resolution of the data that you're looking, like what you're looking at here on these maps, is 1 kilometer. So it's really fine scale resolution from the model, but we clearly don't actually have real soil moisture data every 1 kilometer, not even close to that. So that's part of why we're evaluating these products, is because so NASA's give just a little bit of this more of the story. NASA's nationwide model is generally run at a 12-kilometer grid, and so then they've developed for the Western U.S. these higher resolution versions, which is important over our complex terrain and things like that. So that's why we have these higher resolution products, but we're still kind of we've been running these now for a couple of years and looking at them pretty closely, but there's still some quirks in there. One, for example, you might notice like the Denver Metro, for example, and sometimes it shows up in the other urbanized areas where it like always shows up as dry over the like over urban areas. And we're still kind of trying to sort out what like it's not that it's not that it's all the soil moisture is always dry. It's just that it like doesn't seem to change over the urban areas in this model, and some other things like that. So anyway, we're always open to feedback, because then the NASA group asks us for, how are people using this? Is it helping in decision making related to drought monitoring or related to water management, whatever. So happy to discuss that further with anybody if you find them useful, or if you find that like you have measurements at somewhere, people are taking measurements of soil moisture and they're like totally out of whack with what these show. That's helpful information too. So yeah, sorry, rambling answer there, but hopefully that answers your question a bit and gives a
Yeah, it
little bit of
does.
context of what this is and what we're hoping to do with it and hope to make it useful.
Yeah, no, that's definitely helpful context. I look at these maps often and I'm always amazed at how like fine the detail is on the soil moisture maps. So that is helpful.
Yeah, so it might be a little bit of false detail
Mm. Yeah.
in some areas at
Yeah.
least, but it's cool that you can actually see like you can see the rivers,
Hmm.
and some of that makes sense. That, I mean, right, like in the river valley, the conditions can be quite different from just outside of that in the South Platte Valley or wherever.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, if anybody has any feedback on the specific maps that Russ had talked about, feel free to put it in the chat or email him, email me. And yeah, we'll get you connected. So thanks again, Russ. And also just wanted to say hi to Allie and welcome to our group. Looking forward to working with you. Um, and I think we will turn it over to Brian now. Also, if you just hopped on during Russ's presentation, feel free to put your name and affiliation in the chat if you haven't done so already.
Good morning. Thank you, Emily. Forgive me, I've developed a little bit of congestion and a tickle in my throat since this morning. So hopefully I've gotten myself good to go here, and we will get started. Let me share my. Oh, nope, don't want to share that one. Let me stop sharing that one. Was that sharing just the presentation there?
Yeah, we were
Oh, it
seeing like
was.
half of your screen, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I selected the PowerPoint app, but it didn't seem to work. Let me try again. Let me try this. Sorry, I always have a little trouble with this. All right. I have to move. All right, is that still showing Is that even showing the presentation?
No, we're not seeing anything.
Sorry. All right, let me try this one over here then. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be like actually selecting screens. Not sure what's going on here.
You could email your presentation to me and I could try sharing it. Oh,
Is that?
all right. Yes, we are seeing your slides in PowerPoint.
Right. Okay, you're seeing it in PowerPoint. You're just not seeing the actual slide show primary screen.
Yes, it's not in slideshow mode.
All right, sorry, let me. I don't know why. It won't let me select another screen.
Hey, Brian, I think if you click switch windows, I think that's maybe where it's somewhere in view. I've had this happen to me before too. Like which window it selects when you
Switch
get
windows. There
Zoom.
we go. I'm not sure. I appreciate that. I'm not sure why it's only allowing me to select one. This was not the problem that I had last week. I was able to figure it out faster. All right, well, I'll give it one more second, one more try, and then if not, I'll either send it to Emily or just go from the presenters look. All right, I think I may have it here. Did that work?
Yes. Yep, I see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry for
Yeah.
that.
No worries.
Maybe one day I'll get this figured out. All right. Okay, so Russ had a great presentation and pointed out a number of things that, of course, coincide with the snowpack and our presentation here. I'd also like to kind of run on the coattails of the question you had, Emily, about soil moisture. We are looking to instrument the remainder of our SNOTEL sites with soil moisture. I think about 40 of our sites in Colorado currently have soil moisture monitoring actually at those sites. And then we have to instrument the other, 80 some sites that we have in Colorado. That's about a 10-year effort, and we have to permit each of those with the Forest Service. But it is a sensor suite that we are looking forward to. Right now, the primary soil moisture sensor depths are 4, 8, 20, and potentially 40 if we can get that deep. Sometimes we hit bedrock before 40. We don't get sensors in that deep. And we do have products and tools that you can view on our web pages that are soil moisture observed values for those depths. I debated this morning whether I should put those in, or I debated it yesterday, whether I should put those into the presentation. Our data and our statistics historically are not as robust as we would like them to be. We need to further QA, QC those data sets. However, we can glean a fair amount of information off of them. The values that we were seeing that I looked at yesterday were a little bit more variable, which of course the mountains are a very difficult environment in which to monitor soil moisture just because of a host of reasons, bedrock, runoff, slope, a number of factors. But as it typically is variable at this point, the good part is it is kind of indicating both what we're seeing in this particular slide and what Russ was showing in his presentation, that based on some of the precipitation that we saw earlier in the year, as I'm going to point out and Russ did earlier, that the soil moisture is kind of trending that way, a little bit better in the south, a good bit better in the south, I should say, and a little bit drier in the north generally. And of course, where we're monitoring soil moisture is in the mountains where things have frozen over at this point. So you got to get down pretty deep depending on the site to get to some areas where the soil is not frozen at this point, but we can still glean what we got from those earlier season values and what we are seeing now. So soil moisture is an effort that we are looking forward to. Hopefully in the next 10 years, we'll have all of our sites instrumented, but it is a bit of a longer process, both with the permitting, and we do a full-on soils analysis at all of our sites to give us a really good picture of exactly what the void space is and how much water that truly means. So hopefully that helps
That's
answer your
helpful.
question.
Yeah. Love all the soil moisture work happening.
Yeah, it really is great to see all of these different networks coming together to put out one kind of solid, high resolution product like Russ is showing. Okay, so that's kind of, if you have any questions about soil moisture, don't ever hesitate to reach out to us as well. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the presentation here. So I wanted to do almost exactly what Russ was doing and kind of take a look back a few months ago. Realistically, or I shouldn't say realistically, just looking at this particular map, I wanted to go back to about midsummer through the end of summer, which we kind of call at the end of September 30th. Much as Russ was pointing out, the situation was flipped from where it is kind of now. The southern half of the state had seen better precipitation through much of the end of the summer, and the northern half, not so much, was a little bit below normal through much of the end of summer, which was great. We really needed it. The southern half of the state seems to be on kind of a bit of a longer term drought, and so to see those precip values at a very important time during the summer was really helpful. And then looking through for the beginning of this water year through our first presentation back on November 18th, again, that trend really was continuous from late summer into early fall. Where we saw pretty solid accumulations in the southern half of the state and drier in the north. But really, since about November 18th, kind of mid-December, things really changed and flip-flopped kind of back to a bit of a schema I would say we've seen over the longer term, where things have been a bit wetter in the north, but still drier in the south. Here, I think the bigger point to kind of take note of is the simple fact that really much of the state is a bit drier than normal. So with this, we're looking at precipitation from October 1st, the beginning of the water year, through yesterday, January 20th, in our mountain snowtel locations, where precipitation is for the most part near normal, but actually slightly below and a little bit further below normal in the upper Rio Grande and the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins. Sorry, I'll point it out now, but it's a little bit more clear in a graphic for snowpack specifically. You'll actually see a fair amount of the lighter blues, which means, as you can see in the legend here, between 110 and 130% of normal precipitation. The central portion of the state is what's actually benefited the most from the storms that we've seen so far this water year. And, even in the northern part of the state, you can see a few more of the yellows at the snowtel sites, and even along the Grand Mesa, and even more extreme further down south, where things have just been a good bit drier. But that central portion of the state, the upper Arkansas and the headwaters of the Colorado, a smaller portion of the South Platte, has seen the best precipitation and snowpack accumulation that we've seen so far this year. So really, precipitation wise, we're running a bit below normal this year at 93% of normal statewide. Would like to see those numbers improve, but as Russ pointed out, doesn't look like the prospects for that are looking particularly great. So with the last three maps, we showed a little bit of kind of a time series, but this is a higher resolution time series with this graph. The black line is this year, the trace for this year so far up until yesterday. The green line is median for the 30-year period of average, and the orange line is last year over the course of the year. And I'm pretty sure in most of the time series graphs, I put the orange line in there being last year. So just keep an eye out for that. Here again, you can see that we're 93% of normal. Here with the statewide average, we've really trended relatively close to normal. Again, that green line, we haven't deviated too far from it. So we've been pretty lucky that way statewide. And we are comparing quite closely at this point, almost exactly where we were for precipitation accumulation at this point last year. But of course, as we all know, Colorado is a large state and the mountains make things even more diverse. So things are a little bit more different and varied across the state. So if we look at the Arkansas River Valley, precipitation year to date is a bit above normal. This particular calculation here shows 110% of median. I kind of use normal and median synonymously. In the previous map, you saw that the Arkansas was 109% of normal, just a small little resolution piece there. But doing better than we were last year in the Arkansas and still better than normal, which is good, but we have dried out a little bit in the last few months. So we're getting a little bit closer to normal, but still running pretty close at this point in the Arkansas. Looking at the South Platte, precipitation is 98% of normal. Unfortunately, we are tracking very close to normal, kind of like the statewide average is here. But diving down into the southwest portion of the state, the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins, things have been quite dry, as Russ indicated. We just haven't seen those precipitation accumulations here since, really December, the beginning of December. We saw some good precipitation early on in the year, as the map showed, but things have dried out, unfortunately. Okay, wanted to highlight reservoir storage at this point. And for those of you not familiar, at this point means January 1st, we update these and our databases, these graphics in our databases each month at the beginning of the month for reservoir storage and stream flow. As of January 1st, reservoir storage was at 93% of median. Excuse me, better in the south, fortunately, as we look at basins as a whole, a little bit more near normal to the north and central portion of the state, but the San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basin is behind where it typically is for this time of year. We will update those numbers again, or these numbers, I should say, on February 1st here again. And this is just a different way of looking at reservoir storage again for each of the major basins. Colorado here at the top. This year is the darker kind of green turquoise color, and last year at this time, January 1st, is in the more green color there on the bottom. So you can see that we are running a bit behind where we were this year. Okay, looking at snowpack, again, going to rewind a little bit, going back to the last presentation on November 18th. Again, southern portion of the state was looking a lot better. Again, earlier in the year, these numbers, or the averages, the median values, are quite smaller. And so when we see even sizable storms, or storms that are a little bit above normal, that can make a big difference. That can make a big difference when you're comparing to median or average. And so numerically, those percents of medians and percents of average values can be a little bit more rosy per se. They can seem a little bit more above normal than they might later on in the year, just because one bigger storm can make a huge difference numerically. But focusing on the northern half of the state, near to slightly below normal, especially when you get into the Yampa, White, and North Platte basins. But now moving into snowpack as of yesterday, other than the southern half of the state, things are quite close to normal. South Platte at 101% of normal, Arkansas still coming down off of some of those highs from earlier in the year, and then the upper Colorado at 97% of normal. The Yampa, White, and North Platte basins are running a little bit below, but still closer to normal, and not as far below normal as those San Juans are. Gunnison doing okay, but still kind of feeling some of the effects of those drier storm systems and periods that we've had here recently. Snowpack statewide is at 90% of normal. And then going back to what I was saying back on those precipitation maps where you can see the storms have really kind of focused or benefited most the central mountains in the state. And it's just kind of those two basins. The upper Arkansas is holding on to some of that snowpack and continuing to see snow accumulation 120% of normal. And the Blue River is 118% of normal. But most of the other basins don't even really get close to that 120% of normal, that light blue coloration. So kind of tails off pretty quickly from there. And while I know it's not necessarily the particular interest of this group here, Colorado, we do manage the SNOTEL monitoring in Arizona and Colorado. And I'm not sure if you've been looking at some of the precipitation accumulation and snowpack values that they have down there, but it is very dry. And that makes actually the data collection and quality control quite difficult on us. I won't get into the reasons why that happens, but so we're looking forward to some of the storm totals that they're supposed to see here in this next week down there, but it is quite dry. So excited for them to get some precipitation down there and feel fortunate that we're not as low as they are. Okay, excuse me, let me clear my throat 1 second. So looking at the time series graphs of snowpack statewide, here again, we are at 90% of normal currently as of yesterday. We have dried out a little bit. We have still received some precipitation and some snowpack accumulation. It's just not right where we'd want it to be, and it's been tailing off more recently. Some of those early January storms did help out, but when you're looking at it over the long term, definitely want to continue to see more snowpack and precipitation. I wanted to point out here, I always like to do this. This is the middle of the winter, or the snowpack accumulation season, as I like to call it. We surpassed that on January 13th. Our snowpack peak statewide is typically about 15.4 inches of snow water equivalent. And so the midpoint is 7.7 inches, which all goes to say that we are halfway through our winter. If a typical year were to continue to play out, we would have less than half of our winter remaining. So we're really needing to start, or we really need to continue watching these numbers because every little bit of snow that we accumulate makes a big difference. And if we don't get those accumulations at this point, again, it too makes a big difference in the water supply outcomes from here on out. So, and again, fortunately in 2024, last year, we were quite close to where we are. So hopefully we will get some storms to kind of boost our snowpack from where it's at right now. But as Russ pointed out, not looking super optimistic. Diving into some of the individual basins, again, the South Platte is 101% of normal. We did dip a little bit below normal in the South Platte back in late December, but again, some of those storms that we saw really helped out in the South Platte, and we continue to run pretty close to near normal. Looking at the Laramie and the North Platte basins, where snowpack combined is 93% of normal. We're a little bit below, again, been a bit drier than normal these last few weeks, but still, well, I should say this last week, pull out the pointer here. It was the early part of January that kept us near normal, but surprisingly, at the end of December, we were actually flirting with near record low snowpack. Now in the North Platte, it's further north and tends to accumulate snow almost throughout the entire, early winter and late winter compared to, say, the San Juans, especially the lower elevations. But looking at the math here, this is only 74% of normal snowpack. But even with 74% of normal snowpack, that was flirting with record low snowpack. So just kind of some tight bounds here. Fortunately, that means that the Laramie and North Platte typically accumulates a fair amount of snow and is quite consistent. And this year, it was still within those bounds, but pretty close to being near record low. And then 2024 last year was quite close to where we are, just a slightly above where we are this year. And then looking at the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins, again, snowpack as well as precipitation has really dried out here. We really need a boost in these next few weeks to see an improvement in snowpack. Right now, snowpack is at 74% of normal, but based on what we're seeing, I'm thinking it's going to dip even lower than that. All right, so transitioning into Streamflow forecast, as I briefly mentioned earlier, we distribute and generate our Streamflow forecast at the beginning of each month based on data from our SNOTEL sites and a few other inputs based on January 1 data. So seeing as we have kind of dried out, most particularly in the southern half of the state and a little bit in the northern half of the state, I'm guessing that a number of these forecasts will come down. And as Russ showed, I thought the graphic of the departure from normal, given the future forecast for the next 7 days, that is a great graphic to kind of pair mentally with this one, in the fact that if we don't continue to see any improvement in snowpack as it stands right now, it's a pretty much surefire way to have these streamflow forecasts decrease from January 1st, last month, to this coming month, February 1st. And you can see that these forecasts in the central portion of the state looked pretty good at 120% of normal, kind of thereabouts. Some of the lower forecasts are, what was it, I think 63% of normal, or maybe even 57% of normal here in the San Luis Valley and the upper Rio Grande. But generally, these forecasts were near normal on January 1st, but I'm thinking those are probably going to decline unless we get surprised with more snow than we're forecasting. Okay, so wrap up here. Statewide snowpack is currently at 90% of normal, better in the north, best in the South Platte at 101% of normal, and then lackluster in the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins at 72. Mountain precip is not far behind that at 93% of median. Reservoir storage is doing okay at 93% of median. Statewide varies a little bit basin to basin. So feel free to continue to dig deeper. If I didn't go deep enough into the information that you saw here, dig deeper on our websites and our resources. Streamflow runoff predictions as of January 1st range from 125% of normal to Michi Creek to 73% of normal. I said 63 earlier, forgive me, at the Purgatory River near Trinidad. And so that's actually a relatively consistent relatively normal streamflow forecast kind of range for the entire state, but I would think that those normals or those forecasts are going to come down this month. So, and then as I mentioned, we have less than half of the winter remaining. So pray for snow at this point. That's all that I've got.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions for Brian? Feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. All right, well, hearing none and seeing none, thank you, Brian, for the presentation. And thanks again, Russ, for the presentation as well. Kind of crazy that we're halfway through the snow accumulation period. I kind of didn't realize that. So yeah, if I'll turn it over to the audience now. If anybody wants to come off mute, any local governments, any water providers, water managers, we'd love to hear how the conditions are looking in your neck of the woods. So I'll just open the floor.
Well, hello, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New
John
Year.
with the City of Thornton. Our storage, we're doing real well this winter, although we're not diverting much, a little bit in Stanley Lake. But the last storage report that I have is about just over 81% of capacity, which is good this time of year. Stanley Lake is a big source for us, and our account in Stanley Lake is down to about 64%, which is real normal for this time of year. So storage-wise, we're feeling pretty good. I couldn't find a recent production report, but as of a week ago, we were about 2% above last or below last year, which is good also. Bad for the accountants, but good for the water supply. And then we are currently still in drought watch because our drought plan calls for drought watch when there's drought in any of our watersheds, and that would be the Upper South Platte, Clear Creek, and the Cashlapooter. And so that's the report from Thornton.
Thanks, John.
This is Swithin with Highland Ranch.
Hi.
Right now where our storage is at about 70% capacity for Highland Ranch, which is actually above normal. Conditions down here look to be decent, average, normal, however you want to describe it. So not bad for January.
Great. Thank you, Swithin. Anybody from the West Slope?
Hi, Emily. This is Kaylee from Grand County. No real updates here. Just it's been cold, obviously, and we're hoping for more snow. It's certainly been a dry January, so that's all I've got for you.
Thank you, Kaylee. All right. Well, if no one else wants to share, I think we can conclude our meeting. Thank you all for joining, and thanks for being flexible with the rescheduling this meeting. So I appreciate that. And our next meeting will be on Tuesday, February 25th. So I will see you all then. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Emily. Thank you, everyone.